Welcome to We Are Everyone, a video and podcast series powered by Pivotal Moments, and we focus on the intersection of mental wellness in the workforce. We bring together young professionals and mindful executive mentors to bridge the generational gap and bring to the surface conversations about the importance of mental wellness and how to overcome career tradition challenges. Mental wellness is paramount. Join us. Welcome to We Are Everyone / Mental Recess. I'm your host, Jenn Sherman, and we are very excited, very, very excited to have on the one and only Shoshanna French. She is also my personal intuitive healer. That's also, I think I invited you on the show. I will say I invited you on the show before we started working together last summer. So I'm so happy that we're able to get this on the calendar. But first and foremost, I always like to have our guests kind of give a little background on themselves, and then we can get into the crux of the interview. Welcome, Shoshanna.
Thank you. Thank you. What kind of background? Do you want the dirt or you want the story? I don't know.
I mean, I guess just like a little tidbit, because I feel like we'll get into a little bit more of the dirty dirt when we go into the actual interview, but I guess just a little background to tell our viewers about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm in Denver, Colorado. Let's see. Had my business I've had for 17 years. That's a little bit about me professionally. I was just telling someone the other day, like they were asking me, like, what are your hobbies? And I kept going and going. And they were like all of those things are your hobbies? Like all of those things? I said, I don't even have time to do all the things I like to do. Like I like to do all of those things. So I am an outdoorsy kind of person. I love hiking, kayaking, walking. I love to bicycle. I garden, and I don't like garden like a little, like, as far as I'm concerned, if you're going to do something, like do it all the way. So I don't know, like plant like a few plants. Like I planted 12.5 by 4.5 foot raised beds, like 55, like I planted 55 carrots this last week.
Oh, okay. I mean, I feel like that's kind of like, see, that's why I don't take gardening or like plants, because I kill them. So I'm like, here's the thing, like if I feel like I'm aligned, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to go all in. Like I can't half-ask it, but like if I'm not going to be good at it, I'm just not going to do it at all.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. I don't know sometimes if I'm good at something, and then I do it and I'm like, oh, I don't care if I'm good at it. I just really have a good time. I read a lot. I'm a lifelong learner. That's actually how we got connected. So Joe is a mutual friend of ours. And that's the thing I love about him, is he's also a learner and a questioner of life. And so
Yes.
we have really crazy deep conversations because that interests me. I'm a traveler. I love traveling. It's the thing my husband and I spend our time and energy and money on, is finding ways to travel. We have friends in all corners of the world, so we try to visit at least one friend every year. So let's see what else. I think I said I'm married. I've been married. It'll be 11 years, June 23rd. So coming up in a few weeks, but we've been together for 17 years. We've been together for a while.
That's a commitment. Like I have to say, hats off. Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's always nice to have the partnership, but I mean, it always is like, it's not just like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, like you're attractive. I like your personality. That's like, that's cute, but it's like, let's live together for 17 years and make it like, that's awesome. So congratulations. Do you have a trip planned?
Our next trip is to visit our friend who lives in San Francisco. She's moving back to Germany. So we'll visit her in San Fran. And then when she goes back to Germany, we'll probably visit her there.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like, it's interesting because I was getting so sad because of all my friends who were in DC, which I don't think people come. If you're not from DC, you don't really typically stay here. It's like you come for a second, do your thing, and then leave. But all of my really new school friends, that I call them, came here and then left. So, but now I have places to visit. So I think that's kind of a nice positive reframe.
It is. I love visiting people. We also try to travel where we're not visiting people, but our friends live in fabulous places. In January, we visited our friend for 2 weeks at her 2 properties in Hawaii. We have another friend who lives in St. Croix in the Virgin Islands. She wants us to come back. So it's like, we love traveling, and mostly we love traveling because we love people.
Yeah.
That's for sure something we definitely have in common.
Yeah, no, I love that. So I guess speaking of people, places, things, learning. I'm curious, what led you to your interest in studying intuition? I know you just mentioned you're a lifelong learner, so just
Mhm.
curious.
When I was 18 and away at college, my friend at the time was like, "I want you to go check out this new bookstore." And I was like, "All right." So we went into a bookstore, and you have to keep in mind that I went to a really small, it was the college was liberal, but the town was very conservative. So it's this little tiny town in northern Colorado, and it had a metaphysical bookstore, which is very weird. Like there are more churches than people in that particular town, like of the Christian variety. So a metaphysical bookstore is a little unusual. So we walk into the bookstore, and the woman behind the counter was like, "Oh, there you are." And I thought maybe my friend had told her about me. And I was like, "Oh, hi." Her name was Rosemary. And I kind of fell deep in love with the space of this bookstore. It felt like home for whatever reason. And I came to find out later that she had what she called a download from the universe, from source, that a girl would come in and you'd recognize her by her freckles, and you have to teach her everything you know. So that was my entree into the world of metaphysics. So prior to that, I was kind of a more traditional religious person, like Bible study, church, youth group kind of person. And then this was my kind of experiment into something totally, totally different. And I learned how to meditate, which I'd never done. And while some people say it's like prayer, it's not, because prayer is easy, and meditation, you have to quiet your mind. It's hard. I think meditation is not easy, but that's just my own experience because my brain is always going. So that's how I got into it. And then I never thought about doing it for a living. It was just this thing I learned to do. And as life would have it, all these experiences in college after learning about metaphysics kind of deepened my curiosity. And like I said, lifelong learner, read a lot of books, did a lot of like coursework in college. And then I left all of that and went into kind of traditional transformational stuff. Um, this thing called Lemrick Forum. And then I led programs for the company and did all of that. And then found myself in a business class. And she was like, "What do you want to do? You got to get ahead. The way you get ahead is having another stream of income. You got to start a business." And was like, "What would I even start a business doing?" And so she reminded me of all the things I loved, which is I'm a singer and a songwriter. So we talked about that. And then we talked about that I'm a writer. We talked about doing that. But then she said, "What about that thing you do with cards, tarot cards?" Like I said, like being a
Carrot.
psychic. I
That
read tarot. So she was like, "You mean like being a psychic?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I got cards made on Vistaprint, and that was how it all started.
Sponsored by Vistaprint. Love that.
Yeah. Because it was like, I think on the original card, it was like, and then literally I did it like Girl Scouts sell Girl Scout cookies. Like every person I met, I handed them a card. "Hi, I'm
I,
Shoshanna. I'm a psychic. Here's a card. Do
it,
you need a psychic?" Like,
it's so funny. I actually was at this like happy hour. You should know Katie McKenzie. You don't, but you should. She came into town. She's one of my new school friends that went to she moved to South Carolina, but I was at this event and I just had these cards like from, obviously pre-pandemic. And I'm like, here's a card. It was so weird. But like before, probably a couple like years ago when like Vistaprint was, at its height, like everyone was giving out like business cards, I love that. I love that.
oh, this was 17 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was like, it seems so magical, right? To pay like $7.50 and get 500 cards. I was like, this is magic.
Yeah. It's magic and intuitive. No, I love that. So, I mean, here's like what's kind of cool. And just in regards to like the path and taking this, I guess, energy, or I don't know if you want to call it gift, but something that like you took and you had this like calling, let's say, right? And then you were able to turn that into a business. Is I just think like where we are at right now, and you see all these stories, and we talk a lot about at Pivotal Moments around like mental health, mental wellness, like really being in your like true happiness. But happiness is a feeling, right? Like really just being in yourself. And I think we're seeing what you can convert into business. I mean, you don't, or if you're, whether that's being an entrepreneur at a company or an entrepreneur, but taking that, but then applying it to business is like, it's beautiful, because I don't think typically people think, oh, let me create a business out of energy and being a psychic, and then also doing this intuitive healing. What does that spit into? And then it's just really cool to kind of let you have that creative space to create that for yourself. So
Well, and it started out as being a psychic. I mean, I used to meet people at like coffee shops and do cards. And then about 5 years into business, I was like, oh, I'm not supposed to do that anymore. There's some new variation. And I changed it. And then in 2012, I was in a business class and the guy said, like, this is the pathway you're on. You could become a famous psychic if that's what you really want, like a
yeah.
famous, like psychic reader, healer. And I just had no interest in that, because that's my zone of genius is actually not doing that. My zone of genius is observing and teaching. Like that is actually like the having people trust themselves, like do it for themselves is in fact my purpose. It's my passion on the planet. So right now, this business has just transformed like 100 times as businesses do, but pivot as they say, but it changed a whole bunch of times. So what I find is that every client I have calls me something different because when someone is restoring trust in themselves, they relate to the person helping them do that in a different way. So you call me a healer, you call me an energy healer, but I have other clients who call me like a business psychic, and I have other clients who call me a seer. And then, this is my personal life coach. People all call me something different because it's how they relate to me.
But you know what's so magical about that? And like that's the whole thing about intuition is, I think psychic and like being a psychic and like, how on the cruise ships they used to have those guys who would like, you know, what's it called?
Mentalists.
Yeah. But like I feel like that's so 2012. I just, and not in a bad way. I just think that people are seeking so much validation and affirmation from the outside, and they want to come to you and be like, Shoshanna, tell me my future. I literally almost was like, wait, Shoshanna, can we offline? And like, what do you see in your magic crystal ball? At the end of the day, which I am currently working on, is trusting yourself and being able to like that your intuition is your psychic. Like that's the psychic. I think everyone has some portion of that embedded in them, but since we're so inclined to seek that outside of ourselves, like that's why the whole like psychic aspect came about, and the whole round of pivot. I don't like the word pivot. I mean, I love the word pivotal because we're Pivotal Moments Media, but pivot is just such an overused word in
100%.
business. And it's
Yeah.
like, it makes you feel like, I like when I talk to new business owners and they're just like new startups and they're always just like, and we had to pivot and had to pivot. I'm like, you actually sound like you have no idea what you're doing and you're just going all over the map. I like evolve. Evolve is that you're evolving into the next level of the business, given the demand and evolution of society and the economy and all that jazz. So, I mean, in my sense, like I totally like, and you're using all of your clients as like your evolvement too of what you're seeing in the marketplace. I mean, I think it's fascinating. And I just think what you're doing around like teaching people how to tap into their intuition and how to help others find that ability. Cause I think like we're in such a I'm better than world versus like everyone has superpowers. It's just how do we tap into those superpowers? So I'm kind of curious, like, how did you kind of learn to tap into, I know you've kind of gone through this like spiritual journey, but how did you learn to tap into your own intuition? Because I think it starts with you first. Or have you evolved and learned from others and that has also helped you further tapping into your intuition?
Yeah. Or C, both.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's definitely both. Um, when I was trained in college, it was in a very metaphysical way. So, kind of like, I don't, so for some of the people who listen to this may have heard this expression, I'm not sure, but there's these things called mystery schools. And mystery schools, when people talk about like, what are they called? The Masons, for example, you learn all this knowledge and wisdom. And then in order to join this thing, you have an initiation, right? And it was kind of like that. It was like, first you have to learn how to meditate, and then you're going to learn tools. And then you have to learn about it was like this whole, it was a lot to learn. But my experience was, and this is where other people come in to teach me, is what my experience was, is that I am an incredibly practical person. So I would be at this metaphysical bookstore, like learning how to read cards, learning how to utilize I'm just going to be straight up woo woo, the power of crystals, talking about the crystalline grid on the planet, like all this, like, I mean, far out stuff. And then I was studying sociology. So then I go back to sociology class and we'd have this conversation about the effect of the way in which we use gender to compartmentalize people, and then we even genderize emotions, right? So I'd have like that conversation, which my brain loved. I love learning, I love being practical. It, like, having conversations to understand the deeper meaning of things is really natural for me. And then I go to the metaphysical bookstore and they felt so separate. They felt like two very separate parts of life. And so my journey of the last, I mean, gosh, it was 28. I'm going to be 40. I'll be 46 in September. So I spent, the better part of 20 years trying to figure out how these two things fit together. Like, how do you take intuition out of this mysterious esoteric place and bring it into practical so that you could use your intuition for business? So you could use your intuition for like silly things, like what kind of gift do I get my dad, who's literally the hardest person on the entire planet to buy a gift for? How do I use my intuition to choose which marketing person I hire? Like, using intuition for that. And that took a lot of screwing it up, quite honestly, a lot of screwing it up. But it also took finding teachers who knew things like outside of the worlds that I operated inside of, as Joe would say, like people who existed in bubbles outside of mine. And that just took a lot, like learning different ways of thinking. So, it was only in probably 2012 when I left, like doing that kind of traditional psychic stuff, and begin to create a way to teach people what I do. So
Right.
it's only been the last decade that I've been more focused on teaching than I have using my own for others. You know what I mean?
Right. No, and that makes sense. And also being able to attach. I mean, like being able to detach yourself from like the others and like energy. I mean, it just takes, I think, from being a consultant and the other ways of like, I guess, not getting so caught up on the not failing, because whatever, but not like messing up, but like all the stuff of what you're learning and all of that is to inform where you are now. So it's,
Yeah.
and then getting you farther down that path. And so I'm kind of curious because I mean, at the end of the day, like perspective is everything, and perspective like does help you then probably help others as well.
Yeah.
Because you're, at the end of the day, you're not allowed. I mean, you probably would have been able to do, I mean, unless you were a super genius at like the age of 3, but it takes a decade of learning in order to provide that type of value to clients as well.
What I find is that my clients, it's kind of what you said, my clients tend to dictate or inform where the gap is in my own learning.
Yeah.
So I did work with a woman, this would have been, gosh, just about 10 years ago. And I was working with their company. It was a team of 4. And something that I have a high level of expertise in outside of intuition is communication. I've done lots and lots and lots of training and education, both for others, but as well as had for myself in communication. And I I was working with her, and we had such a gap in language, and I didn't understand why. I was like, what I'm saying completely lands to everybody else in your team but you. I was super frustrated, like crazily frustrated. And when I realized, like, okay, this is a reflection in this moment, opportunity for me to grow as a facilitator, what is it that I'm saying? Like, what is it that it's not landing? Like, why? And when I started asking those questions, my intuition had a lot to say. And it was mainly like, you're not listening to the language she actually uses when she communicates. And when we'd be on the phone, so prior to that, every time I coach people, I had a very particular way I did it. But with her, I would start our call out exactly the same way. I would ground clear and then ask how she'd been doing. That never worked. She found it really overwhelming that I would ask her how she was and not bring something to the call. And it was just it was just like it's a way in which people are oriented. Right. And I was like, so she really caused me to transform how I coach people. And so now when I'm on the phone with new clients, I just check in both with myself and with them intuitively, obviously, but also out loud to see how they respond to either, okay, well, so how are things going? And like if they love that, or if it makes more sense to just let them talk. Because for example, Joe, when we have a call, he just talks. He talks like usually for 15 minutes, kind of just brain dumps, and I'm taking furious notes. And then that's where we start. And I wouldn't have known to do that had she not taught me that, because the way that I'd always done it didn't work. So when you ask the question, like, how do you amalgam, like, how do you make this kind of like interesting mix of things to offer what you offer, and then you just keep evolving as a business owner? How does that happen? Mostly by my clients. When my clients say, can you do this? And if I've never done it before, I always just say yes, because I have real faith in myself that I can figure it out. I mean, obviously I'm not going to do something that I know is not in my wheelhouse, but if someone says, could you create like a training seminar for a group of 10 about X, as long as X is in my wheelhouse, I will do it, even if I've never done a training for 10 people before.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting because I think that's the one thing where when you get stagnant as like mental fit, I mean, going into like the mental brain, right? And the aspect of listening, because I have a certain way and I kind of come in hard, and I have like a couple clients where it comes natural to me and it's like great. And ideally sometimes it's like people tell you you want to work smarter, not harder. All the lines, pivot, smarter, not harder, scale, all these things. And no shade to the people who are doing that. That's not, maybe that's a judgmental Jen coming out, but that's not judgmental. That just means like these buzzwords. What works for me is I like to make my brain hurt sometimes, because that means that if I'm working with a client that's making my brain hurt, it means that I'm learning something new that's not in my wheelhouse, that I'm like, okay, how can I better communicate? What is going on in this person's brain? I call it brain matching. And I'm like, if my brain's not matching with this person's brain, something's off and I need to stop talking and listen, because like that's where you could be talking and it's like, even in a session where I'm like, all right, I'm going to just brain dump, because that's like, it's you kind of come in, you never know where you're meeting someone on a call or something. And I could come in and I'm like there, and you could have had this whole thing, and it's like, meet the person where they are. And like, I think, going into kind of this next topic around at pivotal moments. And we talk a lot about mental fitness. And now mental fitness, I will frame as, I think as we've kind of evolved as an organization, fitness could be a word that can be massaged a little bit depending on how you look at fitness as a word. But in retrospect, I guess not using like, let's look at like, mentally fit, mentally like just, I guess not, I would say even just neutral. Let's just say mentally neutral, in a sense of like, how can you kind of show up in a way every day and understand like what are those practices that you need to take to come to your day mentally neutral, not like completely over here or completely over here. And then how do you strengthen that neutrality? How do you strengthen that um uh aspect? Because I think mentally neutral is a very hard place to get to, in my opinion, and it does take a lot of perseverance. So I'm kind of curious, because you do so much work around this and different personalities, so I'm curious, like, how would you define mental neutrality? And we can also talk about mental fitness, but I just invented that.
I like mental fitness. To me, there is a program I did where he say, in the market, you have an offer and you need to be able to prove fitness, meaning people have to be able to trust that you can, like, if someone said to me, do you want to hike a 14er? I would go, that sounds like fun, but I'm going to have to get in shape to do that, because otherwise I can't prove, I don't have the fitness to climb a 14er.
Yeah. Yes.
not with
Okay.
this person, right?
Yes.
So to me,
Yes.
that's how I relate to fitness, but
Cool.
neutrality works too. I like both.
No, I mean,
Um,
the only reason I brought the fitness up, and this is me also just taking on other guests that we've had on, is that it could be, oh, I'm trying to kind of like finesse and get feedback in real time on interviews around, what that is. So mental fitness. So let's go with mental fitness since that realm's true to you. How would you define mental fitness, Shoshanna?
um, eh, so to me, mental fitness is the ability to be with cognitive dissonance without needing to resolve it. So the the more you can be with it, like, and that's any kind of dissonance within. So thoughts that are dissonant, cognitive dissonance, emotional dissonance, where you might really love someone, but they did something you do not like. And you're like, how do you resolve, like, how do you be with both of those completely oppositional energies without losing your absolute, you know what? You know what I mean? And so without losing your mind, that's how I define mental fitness. And I would say, in my experience as a human being at this exact moment on the planet, that um, practicing mental fitness is core to my ability to show up present and to show up with compassion and kindness, because there are some things that are happening in the world that are really upsetting to me overall and in general. And so I find myself with a lot of dissonance. Like, I find myself noticing people being kinder than I could ever imagine, more generous than I could ever imagine, showing up for people. And you're just and being moved by how amazing they are. And then you read about whatever you want to insert terrible news media story, and you're like, why would someone do that? Like, that doesn't even make sense. So my ability to hold that human being includes both of these things. Like, if I can't be with both of those things, it means I can't be healthy and present, because all of us have parts of ourselves that are like, oh my gosh, so extraordinarily kind, generous, open, like all of the things about being a human being that juice us up and inspire us. And all of us have parts of ourselves that suck. So if you can't be with that in yourself, you definitely can't be with that in the world. And what I mean is not being okay with like the parts of you that suck. I don't mean that. Like, if I'm continually a total jerk to my mom about this one topic, it's not like, okay, I just have to be with it. I'm a jerk about that. I need to do some inner work and like apologize and clean it
Right.
up.
Right. It's
It's
not,
not like I'm gonna
no,
be a jerk,
no, exactly.
but sometimes I have to just be with that, like, oh my God, I can be such a jerk. Why do I be a jerk about that? I don't understand. And so that's from you asked the second question, which was like, one, define mental fitness, and then what do I do to
Yeah.
maintain mental fitness? Um, I have like the way I relate to human beings is that we're made up of four parts: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. So the way that I maintain mental fitness is by attending to and nurturing and caring for all parts of myself. That's the simplest answer. I could go deeper and give specifics, but that is the simplest answer I have.
I feel like, and this is not like this is not an ageism thing. I'm not rushing my years, but I just feel like people in their 40s, they just like, that's when it's just like, boo, everything goes off. Like all the lights and like all those four things you just mentioned come together. It's like 30s, you're like maybe 2/3 of the way there, maybe half, depending on the work you did. 20s, you're like 0 out of 4, at least I was. And so I just feel like 40s is like, yes, like that's like where you're just like, you got it. Um, but that was just a side note. I love that answer. I took note of that. That's what I was scrabbling over here. I think that's one of the best answers that we've gotten, because if you look at the terrible things that are happening in the world, and the thing that we talk about so much here at Pivotal Moments is being proactive about your mental health, because like if you're taught those tools at a young age, I really truly think, of course there's going to be evil, but I really truly think some of this, like what the TF is happening, would be avoided. Like it would just be avoided, but like we're not getting to the crux of that. And I think with conversations like this is why we created the organization. And also, like, we are everyone, we're from all walks of life, right? All of us have those, every person in this world are made up of those 4 things that you just mentioned. Yep. And I think that's so important. So other question is, do you think that intuition relates to mental fitness?
Yes. Yeah. So to me, intuition is a way to navigate all domains of life. So for example, if you notice yourself, like one of my friends called me and she'd been having like a month and a half of just kind of repetitive, anxious thoughts. And then we started to kind of like, I just was listening and being a good friend. And we started to dig in, and actually it was like full on anxiety. I was like, that doesn't sound like anxious thoughts. That sounds like anxiety. You're not sleeping. You're like getting sick when you eat. Like, this sounds like it's a little more serious. And then from that space, from her own intuition, she was able to just ask herself, what would make the biggest difference to help me with this anxiety? Right. So she went to her primary care because that's where she heard to start. And her primary care was like, oh, you need blah, blah, blah drug. And then she had a choice to make, right? Do I take this drug that's being recommended, or is there something else that would help me? So she was able to use her intuition to navigate her to what ultimately made the difference, which was not Western medicine for her, because that was not what made sense for her, but instead was acupuncture and herbs. So that's what she did. And it helped her kind of get over whatever was happening for her that was causing so much anxiety. So for me, intuition is helpful in any and all areas of life. What I always say is when you master intuition, and it's not mastered, but when you master your own intuition, you can use your intuition anywhere, anytime, about anything. Because that's what it's a guidance tool, a navigation tool, whether you're in challenge or not.
Yeah. No, I mean, 110%. And I just also think like navigating between, to go to your example of anxiety, because anxiety is coming from a place of like meow meow meow, and then there's intuition of like meow meow. So it's like being able to understand like both, which is a constant struggle of mine every single day, but I think I'm getting better at it. And and what does that feeling look like, you know? And so I think that looks different to everyone, but also being your own advocate. Where she walked into the doctor's office, the doctor gave her something, she's like, not for me. And so that's also important. And so I think, you know, in regards to personal and professional as well, because that's something, you know, looking at these like dividing lines, I'm kind of curious how, you know, the intuition can be related to and how people can apply, I guess, these approaches to both their personal and professional, since it's so intertwined these days.
Yeah. So the way that I would flip that question would be more like, where are the places where you don't trust yourself? And then that's a good place to apply your intuition. Because when we are in a position, whether it's like, let's say professionally, where you have a boss and you and your boss are not doing well, you're not meshing well, you're not communicating well, and you just keep running into all these breakdowns, it is very unlikely that that's not showing up somewhere else, that there's not another place in your life where you're experiencing something similar. So if you learn how to trust yourself, which is what intuition is about, it's about trusting your own inner knowing, inner feeling, inner sense of guidance. You apply it, for example, to, okay, so in this situation, I don't want to leave my job. What can I do to be able to communicate more easily with my boss? Intuition can help guide you in that. And if you find that in your personal life, every time the phone rings and it's your brother, you don't want to answer it, and you're like, what is that? Intuition can help you have insight into, besides the obvious, how can I heal, solve, or complete the thing that's causing all of this unrest for me about my brother. Yeah. And then I can help you solve that. And the answer your intuition may give you is like, he's an alcoholic jerk. Just literally stop talking to him. And you're like, right. Oh, right.
And it could just,
but you don't know.
Yeah. And it could be just simple. Like, I just think that's the whole thing, where some things are just so simple. Simple. Like Simple Spirit. Simple Spirit. Yes. Simply. I don't know why I was like in the mood for Simply today. Well, I do want to wrap up with one question because we could go on for hours, and I just know that people have a shorter time span these days. So I guess how do you flex or strengthen your mental fitness muscle? What tasks? It could be singing in the shower. I mean, we always have like some really good answers. So
I spend a lot of time observing how I react to things. So the way that I do that now, like right now, my current is every morning I have like a very particular morning practice. So I move my body because that gets me out of my head and into my body, because my body gives me a lot of communication about how I am. And then from that physical movement, I come upstairs into my office and I do what I call opening it, which is like a spiritual practice. And then I take out my journal and I pull cards for myself. So doing kind of those sort of three things, it allows me to go from I wake up and have a million thoughts. It gets me in my body, and then I'm in my body and I notice how I am. And then I'm able to like, instead of react to what's going on in my brain, then I get to listen to my body and then I journal about it. And that's a daily practice. Then the other way that I would say, because I think it's worthwhile mentioning, is I have a tendency to express when I'm upset, not to make somebody else be responsible for my upset, but because I find that when I communicate when I'm upset, it is a way to process out loud and sort of have someone else help me sort out what's going on. So some people do that with a therapist. I have a really amazing husband who's a great listener. So I often do that with him. And the thing to know is that I was not born in a family where you did that. So it's not like, oh, she's been doing this her whole life. No, 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 no. You don't talk about your feelings in my family. So being willing to express upset is important. It helps me break things open and look. So, but all those things together help me do what I say mental fitness is, which is the ability to be with cognitive or emotional dissonance and not lose your ever loving mind.
No, which is so true, because I think at the end of the day, at least I can relate, where if I'm getting fixated or just like judgmental around other people's decisions, if they're close to me, it's because there's something that it's my shit, not theirs. So, and I don't curse, but I like to use the S word sometimes on the podcast. Sorry about. But anyways,
I just made the assumption, because I've been coaching you, that I have a potty mouth. So I've been very conscientious about it.
Yeah.
So
I'm pretty conscientious.
me. If you can't see this and it's only audio, I'm patting myself
it's
on the back
video
right
too. So
good job. So you can see me patting my back.
Exactly. Well, is there anything else that you would like to leave with the audience before we wrapped up today, Shoshanna?
If you are listening to this and you are someone who is like, well, I think I've had an experience of intuition, but how do you strengthen that muscle? Like if that's you listening to this, here's my suggestion. I had a friend that said, you need like an acronym so people can remember this. So here is the acronym. It's really easy to remember. PAL, P-A-L, pause. So if you want to strengthen your connection to your intuition, you have to unplug. Like you have to take time away from your phone, which most of us are like, it's basically wired into our face. You have to unplug from other people, meaning not be available, not for a long period of time, but enough like I do in the morning, I unplug. So pause, ask, meaning your intuition is like having a brilliant, wise person inside of you. You have to ask that wise person questions. So if you've been playing with your intuition by just waiting to see what comes, don't do that. Actually ask questions. And then the L stands for listen. Pause, ask, listen. Listen is a thing that takes practice. You have to learn how your intuition works. So then when you're listening, you know what's intuition and what's random thoughts about the rain on Tuesday.
I love that. The listening portion is so key. I wish I could like go back to my listening class in comms in college and redo that. Mr. Wolf, good old Mr. Wolf. But I was probably like, why am I even here? What is listening? And I just, probably didn't go to a lot of those classes. Anyways, thank you so much, Shoshanna. This has been amazing. I do want to have eventually you and Joe on as a little duo, but I know he's a little bit of an Aquarius. He wants to be the perfect time. So that's cool. But thank you so much for coming. And you can go to simplespirit.com. What's the exact URL?
Yes, that is
awesome.
Simplespirit.com. And if you take the test, the Simple Spirit, there's an intuitive blueprint test that will tell you how your intuition works.
Amazing. And we'll share all those links and all that jazz on in the description when we promote the interview. Well, thank you so much, Shoshanna. I'm your host, Jen Sherman of We Are Everyone /mental recess. I think we're officially branded mental recess now, and we will catch you next time. Thank you. Thank you for tuning into another episode of We Are Everyone. You can subscribe to We Are Everyone on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and also be sure to visit www.pivotalmoments.org to learn more about the organization. And we also want to hear what mental wellness means to you. So you can follow us on social media, submit your video, and we will catch you next time. Thank you so much.